preschool to high school. This summer, let Hooked on Phonics be your personal reading tutor. Maybe this fall, you'll be at the head of the class. Call Hooked on Phonics, 1-800-ABCDEFG.
For the ABC Information Network, I'm Gary Nunn.
This is State Trooper Terrence Hart, stationed in Wayne County. WGBR and the Highway Patrol remind you that seat belts and child safety seats save lives and prevent injuries. That's why it's so important to buckle up the little ones every time you take them out in the car. And remember, seat belts save grown-up lives too.
Scattered thunderstorms are still in today's forecast, mostly for this afternoon and this evening. And once again, like the last several days, most of you will not get a thunderstorm. There are only going to be a few out there scattered about. Otherwise, partly sunny and muggy with highs in the low 90s, down to 70 tonight. And tomorrow, partly sunny, a few scattered storms and highs around 90. I'm Bill Schmidt at the Weather Center.
Hi, this is Rush Limbaugh, your first information source, 1150 WGBR. This is the Excellence in Broadcasting Network of the Rush Limbaugh program. Another excursion into broadcast excellence is dead ahead. This is a special edition of the Rush Limbaugh program, America Held Hostage. And now, from our studios in New York City, here is Rush Limbaugh.
Muchos gracias. Johnny Donovan, day 161 of the Raw Deal. Not the New Deal. The Raw Deal. The Clinton presidency, ladies and gentlemen, known as the hostage crisis, which holds all of us Americans in its evil clutches. Yes, it's big news today. The President of the United States was afforded not much applause while attending a speech, making a speech at the National Federation of Independent Businessmen, or businesses, and yet Republicans were given a standing O. And I tell you what, when this kind of thing happens, guess what happens? The Republicans come out of there feeling enthused and encouraged and so forth. I guarantee you Dole's going to come out of there. We can beat this plan. We can defeat this plan in conference. He's going to be urging people to do it. We will keep you advised on various procedures and policies that are emanating here. We've also got the list of senators up for re-election, the Democrats who voted for the bill. Do you hear what Pat Schroeder said on Face the Nation, Disgrace the Nation, when she's on it? The Bob Schieffer Sunday morning CBS show, Disgrace the Nation. She said that after all of the criticism at Clinton and so forth, she said, this really has turned into a get the president town, hasn't it? And I wonder what she thinks it was for the last 12 years. It was nothing but a get the president town. I just love pointing out the things which are somewhat hypocritical on these people's part, and it's a pleasure to do, folks. Now let's talk about the Supreme Court's ruling yesterday on racial gerrymandering. You know, I have invented a new term. It's called get-evenism, or it has a derivative called get-even-with-em-ism. And it basically is a proper name for what we call anti-discrimination. Just to reiterate, we're not trying to end discrimination in America. If we did that, we would really be trying to create a colorblind society and a gender-blind society and a sexual orientation-blind society. We're not trying to do that. What we're trying to do is shift the discrimination from one group to the next and call it solving a problem when all we're doing is getting even with. We're getting even with the rich on this tax planet. For what? For doing well. You've been made to believe the rich have been stealing and cheating and so forth. That's not the case. We've shown you who the rich and the millionaires are. 80% of them are just like you. And 80% of them worked hard and did not inherit their money. And in race, of course, we're transferring the discrimination from one group to another and saying, here, you see how it feels for a while. And we've been doing this basically since the early 70s. And maybe you can date it prior to then. The problem with it was, aside from its being wrong-headed philosophically from the get-go, that nobody ever set up an end. Nobody ever defined that day when compensatory treatment or reverse discrimination had been sufficient, and that the newly discriminated now knew what it was like, and so everything's equal now. That day was never established, that definition was never defined, and so it goes on in perpetuity. But occasionally you have little jolts of reason permeate society, as was the case yesterday with the Supreme Court's ruling 5-4 to halt the most flagrant example of racial gerrymandering on the U.S. political map. Now, it happens to be the 12th District of North Carolina. We will show you this on television. And, oh, look at it. Jack Kemp has just called. We will put this conversation aside because former Secretary Kemp, I'm sure, is running a busy schedule and has heard the Kennedy cuts. And we haven't talked to him in a long time anyway, so we say, oh, Jack, welcome to the program.
Well, this is the Rush Limbaugh Institute.
It is.
For the study of advanced entrepreneurial capitalism.
There you go.
This is your number one champion calling.
I'm glad to hear from you. This is a real thrill and an honor to hear from you. How are things?
I loved playing the 1962 New York Economic Club speech by John F. Kennedy, because if you remember, that was the predicate for the Kemp-Roth-Reagan tax rate reductions of 1981, of which I'm very proud. And you mentioned Laffer and Reagan and Kemp, so I thought I'd call my favorite talk show host and say hello to you and your thousands of millions of listeners.
Well, they're always great to hear from you.
I've got one correction for you.
Yeah.
Are you open to any corrections?
By all means. Take your best shot.
Barry Goldwater, bless his heart, led the fight against the Kennedy tax rate reductions, as did most conservatives in 1962 and 63, Rush, because they didn't think it was conservative orthodoxy to cut tax rates before the budget was in perfect equilibrium. So Kennedy really had to cut tax rates without the support of the center-right of the political spectrum.
Well, I was 12 years old then, and some people asked me the question. I was trying to answer it logically without really knowing. Are you saying that that these were Kennedy's heartfelt ideas?
Well, I don't know. He certainly put a lot of effort into it. He said I think right before he was tragically assassinated, he said, "It is a paradoxical truth that high tax rates cause low revenues, and the best and fastest way to get more revenue for government is to bring down the high tax rates on labor and capital." And that's essentially what he was saying at the New York Economic Club. So whether it was in his heart or in his soul or perhaps political is less important than, as you said, he learned it from Konrad Adenauer and Ludwig Erhard, who got it from Andrew Mellon and Calvin Coolidge, who got it from Abraham Lincoln, and who got it from Alexander Hamilton, who got it from Joseph, who in Pharaoh's Egypt cut the top rate from 90 down to 20 to launch the 7 fat years of Egypt.
Well, that's true. You can trace this all the way back to Joseph and the pharaohs. You can. That's absolutely right. In fact, that's where Barclay got the title for his book, isn't it?
That's it, exactly.
7 fat years.
And they had 7 fat years when the tax rate was a flat 20, and they had 7 lean years when he used up all of the grain in the storehouses that had overflowed, but he began to raise taxes again and lost sight of his original model, and that's what's wrong with Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton has lost sight of the Kennedy tax rate reductions, and he's following Jimmy Carter. In fact, I said today at the National NFIB luncheon rush that Bill Clinton's administration has the most anti-capitalistic mentality of any administration in our lifetime.
Why do you think that is? Because this stuff's not hard to learn. I mean, is it ideology that he just disagrees ideologically with this theory?
Well, you mentioned that he traveled to Germany and worshipped, or I should say, admired the Social Democrats. If you remember, the Social Democratic Party of West Germany was a follow-on to the Socialist Party of Kurt Schumacher that had lost to Konrad Adenauer in 1948, right before the famous Wirtschaftsstunde was unleashed by Adenauer and Ludwig Erhard. So Kennedy listened to Adenauer and Erhard, and Bill Clinton is listening to Kurt Schumacher and the Social Democrats of Europe.
And Robert Rubin and Robert Reich.
Robert Reich, according to Investors Business Daily last week, said that the age of entrepreneurs is over. We need collective entrepreneurship. How's that for an oxymoron?
Oh, I heard about the collective entrepreneurship. I mean, they've got all the right terminology. It's just scary, the terms these people use.
Well, they're turning economics on its head. They're suggesting that taxes are contributions, that spending is investment, that sacrifice should be made by the American people, not by government, and that entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial capitalism is a myth that has outlasted its time. I announced today, incidentally, a newsletter called The American Entrepreneur in order to encourage the men and women, the moms and pops, and the potential entrepreneurs that there are things in regulatory and tax policy that can be changed to restore a growing economy such as you've been talking about. And as you pointed out, Rush, as John F. Kennedy was celebrating at the New York Economic Club in 1962.
Well, Jack, what does Empower America plan to do to take on the conference committees, the conference committee on this budget plan? Is there anything you guys plan to do to get involved in that?
Well, we've announced a coalition led by Gene Kirkpatrick, Bill Bennett, Jack Kemp, and Vin Weber, and Empower America, with our representatives around the country, a major effort to coalesce 100 or so organizations, basically to the center right of the political spectrum, conservative groups, to beat not only the BTU tax and the energy tax rush, but they'll also launch an effort against the increase in taxes on Social Security recipients, and also to beat the income tax rate increases. We think the income tax rate increase that is going to be faced by individual proprietorships, partnerships, small farms, small businessmen and women. 55% of all of the taxes that are going to be placed on the back of the individual payers in America will hit small business men and women, and mom and pop and entrepreneurs. And so we've announced an effort to lead 100 organizations against the income tax rate increase.
What are you going to do? Do you have any battle plans specifically laid out yet?
We've held our first press conference. We are putting all these organizations, trying to get them on board to go to Capitol Hill. We're trying to launch a letter-writing campaign to members of Congress to beat the conference committee that's coming out, or that they're working on right now, to resolve the differences between the House and the Senate version. And I know you noticed that Senator Moynihan in the New York Times last week bragged about the tax rate increase being the most progressive since World War II. We're against progressivity in the tax code. I mean, Karl Marx launched progressivity as a way of redistributing income and punishing success. We are going to pursue a flatter, fairer, lower, simpler tax rate system for all the American people. And I think if John F. Kennedy were here today, he'd be with us, not with Bill Clinton.
I have a question. I really don't mean this to be anything other than born of my natural curiosity, but I know that in the past there has been some disagreement between Bob Dole and the real conservative wing of the Republican Party on tax rates and so forth. Is there some unity on this now between you guys and Senator Dole in his office?
Yeah, I think Bob Dole has done a magnificent job of organizing the Republican senators in opposing the Clinton spend your way to prosperity schemes that would not empower America but empower bureaucracy and grow the government. So I give my total support to Bob and Phil and Trent Lott and others who have done such yeoman work in opposing bad things. But the next thing that has to be done by Republicans, in my view, is to not just talk about budget and fiscal austerity, but to talk about economic growth. And that's why when I was listening to the radio as I went up to speak to the small business convention at NFIB that Bill Clinton had spoken to this morning, and I was listening to your show, I was so thrilled that you quoted John F. Kennedy from the 62 December New York Economic Club speech, because that is where the Republican conservative movement has to go. It has to talk about growth, equality of opportunity for all people, lower tax rates,
What were the marginal rates in 62? Do you know?
91%.
91% was a top marginal rate?
91 at the top and 20 at the bottom. And Kennedy's tax rate cut the top rate to 70, the bottom rate to 14. He cut the capital gains tax rate in half. He cut the corporate rate from 52 to 48. And, of course, we were on the gold standard in 1962. William McChesney Martin was chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. Interest rates were 3%. I was quarterback of the San Diego Chargers, and my wife and I had just bought a new home in Point Loma, San Diego, for about, I think it was a $30,000 mortgage at a 4.5% fixed 30-year FHA rate. Nice days.
In San Diego.
Yeah.
Well, what was the capital gains rate that he had?
Well, I think the top rate at the time was probably in the low 40s. It went down to less than 28. It went back to 49 under Richard Nixon and Jerry Ford, and then Bill Steiger lowered it to 28 in 1978 and launched a venture capital revolution. And then the Kemp-Roth-Reagan tax rate reductions rush of 1981 cut it by a third down to 20.
And look at the growth that happened. See, the growth of the 80s can't be there. You compare those 8 years of the 80s, or the 7, if you want to call them the 7, to any of the previous years in the 70s.
Yep.
And all this with the 91% rate, the 70% rate, and all the, and everybody said at the time the 80s was the longest sustained economic recovery in the history of the post-war world.
And it was brought to an end by the 1990
budget deal, which they're doing
increase
all over again in 93.
And really, the 1990 budget deal, if you remember, raised capital gains taxes. It left them unindexed. It smashed entrepreneurship in America and brought this peacetime recovery to an end, and the deficit did not go down, Rush, as you pointed out so many times. It went up by $700 billion. Larry Kudlow says we lost $1.2 trillion in 4 years of GNP, and that alone would have been a couple $100 billion of revenue.
Well, it's just out there for people to see. I'm glad you called, because
well, I was thrilled with your show.
When you spell it out, people hear it and they understand it.
Well, you have become a champion of it, and I just want to thank you for it.
You bet.
And when I come home at night and my wife Joanne says that she and her mother were had gone to a Rush restaurant. Rush room in a restaurant to listen to Rush Limbaugh, I realize how powerful these ideas are when articulated by somebody with audacity and tenacity.
Well, look, I've had a lot of great mentors. You're one of them, and I thank you very much.
Well, you're terrific.
Be good.
And just want you to know, a lot of Kemp family members listening to Rush Limbaugh.
Thanks a whole lot. I appreciate it.
All the best.
Thank you, sir. We'll be back with more after this.
You're listening to the EIB Network.
Even though this is a Limbaugh Letter newsletter commercial, I want to talk to you about the art of persuasion. Don't you find it frustrating to tell people the truth about the 80s, the truth about Reaganomics, and the truth about conservatism and have them still not get it? Well, one of the ways to persuade people that I've always found, ladies and gentlemen, is to enable people to draw their own conclusion, to come to the right conclusion themselves. Rather than just sit there and point fingers in their face and say, this is true, this is true, this is true, they're just going to rebel. But you give them a way that they can convince themselves, and you've persuaded them. And after all, isn't that the goal? Well, that's what we're going to do in the next issue of the Limbaugh Letter. We got a pop quiz. This is a brilliant quiz. It's got all the truth, all the answers for the truth about the 80s and Reaganomics and conservatism. You show this to any liberal, and they'll be persuaded. It's free with a subscription to the Limbaugh Letter. Call 800-457-4141. 12 issues, $29.95. 800-457-4141. Let's get going and do it.
School's out. Report cards are in. If that report card said, get help with reading this summer, try Hooked on Phonics. Hooked on Phonics is a fun and easy way to sound out and read most of the words in the English language. So from preschool to high school, this summer, let Hooked on Phonics be your personal reading tutor. Maybe this fall, you'll be at the head of the class. Call Hooked on Phonics, 1-800-ABCDEFG.
Ever wished you could find a car dealer who would give you fair prices and courteous service? Ever heard of Courtesy Buick GMC Truck Mercedes in Goldsboro? Ever been there? You need to go there to Courtesy Buick GMC Mercedes, because that's what you'll get and more. At Courtesy Buick in Goldsboro, you'll find a large selection of new Buick cars, a large selection of new GMC trucks and vans, and a large selection of Mercedes-Benz cars. Say you're not looking for a new car? At Courtesy, you'll also find the area's largest selection of program cars. You know the ones. They're used cars sold to the dealer by the manufacturer, and most still have some factory warranty left. Prices on these cars start as low as $64.50, and that includes automatic transmission and air conditioning. Say you're not looking for a car at all? Well, at Courtesy Buick GMC Truck Mercedes can still help. They rate their customer service department second to none. With their factory-trained technicians, they can offer routine maintenance and major repairs at substantial savings. So if you're looking for a car or truck, or just need your present car serviced, go by Courtesy Buick GMC Mercedes today and visit with some of the nicest folks you'll ever meet.
A Kingman's occasion, you know your family likes to get together. You know it's only right, good good memories last forever when the workday ends and you're among friends. You'll come back again. Make every day a Caitlin's occasion.
Caitlin's in Cobblestone Place on Spence Avenue.
Electricians?
No problem.
Mechanics?
No problem.
Chefs?
Got 'em.
Today, there are highly skilled military veterans available in nearly every job category. To find the right vet for your job, call Operation Transition at 1-800-727-3677. You'll have access to a vast resume and referral system. You can even place job ads on a worldwide electronic bulletin board. Hire today's vets. It's not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do.
Teacher.
No problem.
Programmer.
Got 'em.
A public
No
service
problem.
message from the Department of Defense.
Then I'm logging on to CompuServe, looking at some mail and the requests to play the tape, to keep playing the Kennedy tape are rolling in here. Keep playing it, gotta hear it, keep pounding it into people's heads. We will, but we don't want to do it so much that people get tired of it. So we'll judiciously use it. In the meantime, let's go back to some phones. Oh, by the way, one observation. Jack Kemp may not have realized it when he said it, but ladies and gentlemen, we now know why there is this institutional opposition to low tax rates in the liberal wing of the Democratic Party. It's because they are biblical in nature and in root. When you can trace the lowering of tax rates on grain from 90% to 20%, giving 7 fat years during the days of Pharaoh in Egypt, why, then you are tracing the roots of lower taxes and rising prosperity to religion, and there is separation of church and state, and anything that has a religious root or foundation is not qualified, is not allowable. Now, I jest, of course, but do I really? Or as in the case of all good humor, as in the case of all good satire, as in the case of all good parody, there must be truth. There must be a substantial amount of truth for the humor to parody the satire to work, and it does in this case. So, you see, it's not the evil Ronald Reagan. You can trace individual prosperity, economic growth, all the way back to the Bible, the Old Testament. Isn't it amazing? We'll take a break here, and we will get to your phone calls, I promise, after the break.
Let's stack up all the features of the new Mita LDC 650 plain paper fax machine. There's laser printing, low cost so you don't have to settle for thermal or ordinary plain paper fax machines, dual access, batch transmission, dial confirmation, quick scan, and more. Stack it all up, and the Mita LDC 650 comes out on top. And now get 0% financing with low monthly payments. For details, call your Mita fax dealer or 1-800-ABC-MITA. This is WGBR News, Goldsboro's very own.
This is Wayne Alley reporting WGBR News. Wayne County Commissioners directed the county manager and finance officer last night to put all their 1993-94 budget figures together, along with a tax increase of 5 cents for the full Board of Commissioners to consider tomorrow night. Commissioner Hardy Sullivan called for the tax increase of 5 cents, if approved, to be used for economic development and county emergencies. His proposal was approved on a second motion, but even then, with Commissioners John Tart and Andy Anderson voting against it. Commissioners George Wolf, Jimmy Ford, and Sullivan voted in favor of the motion, and Chairman John Henry Wooten cast the deciding vote. Commissioner Tart questioned why Sullivan wanted to put the tax increase in, and Sullivan's response was they would have to do it all again if they did not go ahead and put it in. And he told Commissioner Tart, you can vote for it or against it. All of that took place after commissioners restored about $62,000 in cuts to the proposed 93-94 budget, including $54,000 for the Goldsboro-Wayne Airport, $5,000 for an area beaver control program in the event the legislature does not provide funds, and $3,000 for maintenance of the county fire training facility. Money restored for the airport includes money for infrastructure for the first of 2 prospective tenants and $19,000 for the purchase of land. Wayne County Commissioners unanimously approved last night a resolution that says they'll no longer pay the increased cost of mandated programs. In doing so, commissioners elected not to fund in next year's proposed budget a more than $400,000 mandated increase in public assistance costs through social services. That increase had been projected and recommended by the state. Commissioners in that resolution request that the state legislative delegation secure funds to cover these mandated costs or to exempt Wayne County from this continuing burden. Commissioners pointed to an alarming number of generations from the same family looking to welfare as being right for them to receive, instead of short-term help to get them through a misfortune, and said it becomes a vicious cycle. The town of Mount Olive employed attorney William S. Biasi last night to answer the charges brought against the town and to defend it against the lawsuit brought by the Mount Olive area of the Wayne County Minority Political Action Committee and individual plaintiffs. That suit seeks elections by districts. Biasi is one of the few recognized expert attorneys in the areas of Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. He's a member of the firm of Smith, Helms, Mullis & Moore, which has offices in Greensboro, Raleigh, and Charlotte. And that's an update of WGBR News. I'm Wayne Alley reporting.
Typical summertime heat coming up for the rest of today and again tomorrow. No records being broken, but it'll feel like we ought to be breaking a record. It's going to be very hot and muggy out there. Low 90s for highs today, a lot of sun, and a few scattered storms later this afternoon or this evening. Tonight's low near 70, then tomorrow partly sunny, a few scattered afternoon storms again. Highs tomorrow near 90. I'm Bill Schmidt at the Weather Center.
1150 WGBR, Eastern Carolina's home for the Rush Limbaugh Show. Crashing through the obstacles, rolling over the barricades, refusing to stop even for a moment in hostile territory. The dust is rising behind us as the caravan rolls and grows.